Thank you all for being here. We really want to welcome you to our workshop on cannabis cultivation in the Yuba River watershed. We're really excited for this to happen. Thank you all for your interest. We look forward to a really great discussion today. In this workshop, we plan on unpacking some of the results from our 2021 Cannabis Community-Wide Survey. We'll also discuss an array of the cultivation types in the Yuba watershed, and we'll sort of unpack some of the common misconceptions that the community has had, given the results that we saw in that 2021 survey. So I'd like to start off with some brief introductions, which we probably don't need at this point, but I will do it anyway. I'll start with myself. I'm new to SYRCL. I'm the policy director at SYRCL. My name is Gianna Satude. Then we have Alicia Weissman. She is our watershed science program manager with SYRCL. And then we have Diana Gamzon. She is the executive director of Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. So we're really honored to have her with us today as our guest speaker. A few housekeeping items before we move on. As noted, this workshop will be recorded for future. So if any of your friends or community members were unable to attend tonight, please share. Once we have that available, we'll share out for all of you to share with your networks. Additionally, as you saw, we have snacks at the table, so feel free to help yourself. We also have our communications table. Thank you, Daniel. Our communications director is with us here today to share some information about SYRCL as an organization if you're all interested or would like additional information about us. And we have a sign-in sheet, so please feel free to sign in, or please do sign in so that we know that you're here and that we can recognize that. Thank you again for being here. So a brief overview of Growing Green for the Yuba. SYRCL launched this program in 2013 to help the community understand how regulation can be a tool to ensure that cannabis cultivation in the community doesn't negatively impact our water quality, the quantity, or the habitat for fish and wildlife in our communities. It's interesting to note that we launched this program in 2013, years before 2016 when cannabis was legalized statewide. So we were ahead of the curve in that notion, and really wanted to understand, have the community understand that regulation can really be a tool in that way. SYRCL has been instrumental in statewide policy. We worked on watershed designations for cannabis appellations, which are like labels for cannabis cultivation, which encourage boutique, environmentally friendly culture and labeling schemes for Yuba cannabis. And we also continue to engage at the local level on cannabis policy making. And additionally, Alicia in particular has been involved in creating methods to test water quality and soil at cannabis cultivation sites so that we can measure the effectiveness of BMPs, and we also look forward to future work in that arena. Additionally, we have some policy priorities for Growing Green. This really drives the work that we do in everything that, and particularly that we do in Growing Green. So first of all, we continue to coordinate with county staff. Thomas is here from the county. We really want to ensure that we're educating community members such as yourselves about the environmental benefits of cannabis cultivation if it's done in a sustainable way. And we inform local policy as well, as I mentioned before. And we also aim to quantify the impact of cannabis on Yuba water quality, as I mentioned before. So those are the three driving factors for our policy priorities. So with all those things in mind, we have a background of Growing Green and what our priorities are. We'll get into an overview of our discussion today. So first we're going to talk about the cannabis survey, And then we'll talk about the legal discussion and the various types of cultivation. And then we'll get into more of the meat of the conversation, which is some of the misconceptions that the community has. So our survey, with all those things in mind, let's jump into what the responses were. And this is just a high-level overview. We do have the results of our survey on our website if you're interested in diving deeper. So 134 people from the community responded to our community's cannabis survey. 62% of those were community members, so non-growers. 20% of those were hobby growers, and 18% were cannabis cultivators. So that's defined as having 7 or more cannabis plants. And where were they located? Most of the respondents were in Nevada County, so 96% were in Nevada County. Of those surveyed, how many had come into compliance? 19% of those surveyed had come into compliance. 14% were in the process of doing so, 25% had not, and 21% were uninterested in coming into compliance altogether. So why did people decide to not come into compliance? I think that was one of the key questions. The top 3 reasons we found, the first being a regulatory burden. People found that it was too complicated of a process to go through to enter into the compliance process. So that second is the cost. And third was the fear or the lack of trust in government institutions. So there was sort of a disconnect between the community and the government in which was providing the compliance process. So how satisfied overall were people with the compliance process and the related outcomes? So if they went through it and they had various outcomes, how satisfied were people? Overall, 58%, so a slight majority of the people were neutral in the process. They didn't particularly have a strong opinion one way or the other in terms of the process. On the outcomes, 45% were neutral about the outcomes, and 35% were dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So those are people who have gone through the process and have had some kind of, lack of access to resources or financing, etc. And there we have a smaller number, 20% were satisfied. What were the main concerns regarding cannabis cultivation? The first was environmental impacts, so potential impacts on water diversions, pollution, etc. The second, cultural impacts, so how that would affect the community in Nevada County, which is very important and a part of the culture here. How does that impact Nevada County? People were concerned about that. A lack of fairness in the current system. Those who chose not to come into compliance weren't necessarily facing consequences, as opposed to those who chose to do the right thing and go through the legal process. And economic impacts, as we said before, the cost could be numerous things, but overall economic impacts with respect to cannabis cultivation overall in the county. So what were the key takeaways from this survey? We found that a need exists to improve the relationships between those involved in developing the compliance process and those going through it. So that goes back to that lack of trust and all of those things. That needs to be developed a little bit more. The process of coming into compliance is not user-friendly, so that's how satisfied were people, right? We found that people were either neutral or dissatisfied with the process. Respondents of all types want to see greater enforcement of the rules. So that goes back to the lack of fairness or perceived lack of fairness in the process. And respondents are concerned about the impacts of large-scale cannabis on local culture. So again, that goes back to the perceived impacts that cannabis cultivation or an expansion of cannabis cultivation might have on the cherished Nevada County culture that you all have here, and what that might look like. So keeping all of that in mind, those results were taken in 2021, I think a lot of that can still be relevant today. And certainly a lot has changed since 2012, which I'll go over a brief timeline of cannabis. This certainly isn't everything. This is just some of the highlights. But a lot has changed, and that certainly leads us to where we are today, where there are a lot of misconceptions in the community that we hope to dispel in our conversation later on. But here you can see a brief timeline where in 2012, Nevada County passed the medical marijuana cultivation ordinance. That was very early on. In 2016, Prop 64 passed, which legalized marijuana in California. And then in 2017, Nevada County's ordinance was amended to be in compliance with Prop 64. So again, it's making another incremental step towards legalization of cannabis cultivation. And then in 2018, I think that's a pivotal moment as well, where the board approved a draft ordinance for long-term cannabis cultivation regulations, and that sort of started a process for what that's going to look like in Nevada County. And in 2019, we saw the first permitted commercial cannabis site in the county. In 2022, as I'm sure you're all aware, we saw the county propose revisions to expand its cannabis commercial cannabis cultivation ordinance. And then just yesterday, the Board of Supervisors voted on that ordinance. And so that's probably a conversation for another workshop, but as you can see, a lot has been changing, and there have been incremental steps over the course of several years to move this forward. And so with that have been a lot of misconceptions and things in the community that we hope to talk about next. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Alicia to talk about some of the various types of cultivation and how they exist in the community and what we can learn from that. Thank you.
Okay, so like Gianna mentioned, a lot has changed in the past, 10 years with cannabis cultivation. And so whether you're in the cultivation community or just in the larger Nevada County community at large, it can be a little confusing. So what does it mean to be a legal grow, an egregious grow, or a green grow? So we're gonna unpack those terms a little bit here. Legal grows essentially as pretty straightforward, are licensed, they're adhering to local laws as well as state laws. They're basically held to strict canopy requirements, strict water quality and safety requirements, and often have a large monetary expense associated with this process as well. So here's some nice pictures of some real tidy legal cultivation sites. To kind of compare this, we have examples of an egregious grow. So you can think of these just like the bad actor, right? I think one of the things we want to talk about through today's presentation is just how cannabis, like anything else, is a spectrum, right? You have potentially bad actors who kind of are the worst case scenario. And for those of you that have lived here a long time, in 2017, times like that, we might have seen a peak or a spike in these types of cultivation sites. And even 2016, around that time period, 2015. These type of sites are not permitted. They potentially have irresponsible use of pesticides and fertilizers. They may be, more of a guerrilla grow type thing where it's using rodenticides and being on public lands, illegal water diversions, illegal canopicides. So, mass generalization, all in all, not following the rules. Then you have green. So this particular definition of a cultivation site is actually independent of whether it is licensed or not. I think that those of us who have been living here for a long time and legacy cultivators in Nevada County, were potentially exceeding environmental standards well before the path to full legalization came in place. So when we say a green grow, this is just solely looking at the kind of environmental stewardship that this cultivation site has. So it has to be environmentally friendly, a component of land stewardship, again, not necessarily regulated, it could exceed regulatory standards, and could use best management practices and often uses organic nutrients or pesticides. Okay, now we're going to dive into some of the misconceptions. These were taken from our survey, and actually one that we don't have in here, which was that some people who filled out the survey actually thought that SYRCL was anti-cannabis. So I think that's we're a neutral party. It's something worth saying. Our main mission is to really focus on the watershed and the impacts that cannabis can have on the watershed. And for that reason, we are supportive of regulation and the use of EMPs. As we think that regulation can be a tool to help make sure that cannabis cultivation is being done in a way that's best for the watershed. So the first misconception that we've heard is that cannabis harms water quality. So while this can be true in certain situations, it's important to remember that cannabis cultivation, just like other forms of agriculture, is a wide spectrum, and depending on the types of cultivation practices, that will relate to the environmental impacts, right? So if you have an egregious grow that has illegal grading, essentially erosion where there's mass wasting that's happening and there's soil flowing into the river, that is not good for the UF, right? So there are certainly scenarios where cannabis cultivation is not good for water quality. But through the use of best management practices and through the legal regime, we think that cannabis can, the way you're cultivating can minimize environmental impacts. So just given legalization, for example, cultivators have to adhere to pretty strict water quality standards at both the local county level and through the water quality control boards. They are required to have a setback from streams and rivers. So that alone is a way that we can ensure that cannabis isn't affecting water quality. Other ways are through the use of best management practices, and there's a lot more data that needs to be collected in this realm on how best management practices can help cannabis reduce their risk to water quality. Through SYRCL's Growing Green program, we have implemented a protocol at a local cannabis site. It's a very limited study. We've only collected data one time there. But this particular site uses a variety of best management practices. And our initial results did not see a spike in nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus downstream of the site. And we did an upstream and downstream comparison. But we do hope to expand on this data set, sampling at the same site multiple different times at different seasonal points, as well as multiple different cannabis sites. The state of California is also interested in expanding the data pool to determine more about this. They did have a grant program out recently, so we'll see what unfolds there in terms of helping to bridge this data gap. So again, more data is needed, but just like other agricultural types, we think that best management practices have the ability to reduce impacts as well as the legal regime. Okay, misconception. Cannabis cultivation decimates our local water supply. I need my notes for this one because I'm going to cite paper, so bear with me. So again, there are instances, especially outside of the legal regime, with egregious cultivators who are potentially diverting from streams, things of that nature. that 100% can decimate water at the times where we need it most for fish and stuff like that. But there have been studies done looking at legal cannabis. This study was done by the Central Valley Water Control Board. They presented this, it's not published, they presented it at the San Juan conference in 2021. And essentially the study found that legal cannabis did not use nearly as much water as irrigated pasture. So it compared two different streams, Hayford Creek and the Trinity River, and both July and September. And in July, the Hayford Creek had flows of 44 cubic feet per second. And of that, irrigated pastures were using 17%, and cannabis was using 3%. Also in July, in the Trinity River, which had 117 cubic feet per second, irrigated pasture was using about 7.5%, and cannabis was using about 2.5%. In September, when flows decreased, cannabis was using up to 6% of the Trinity. So this study was done in 2017, I might add, when cultivation sites were more prevalent. There has been a decline in cultivation sites, at least in certain areas, since 2017. So that particular study was done using the number of sites at that time, and they even claimed that they likely overestimate cannabis water usage because they made an assumption based on the higher end of water usage rates and no storage. So they assumed that everything was coming from irrigation supply and that nothing was coming from like rainwater storage or deep groundwater aquifers. It is important to know that shallow aquifers do pull from stream channels. So it is an important discussion, right? How we want to manage our water in California, we have to think about that, right? Like maybe if it's food, it's worth more. Like that's a discussion that California needs to have as we kind of move towards times when we have these longer, extensive periods of drought year after year. It's important that we do have a handle on what we're spending water on. That being said, regulation and licensing allows, I was going to use the pointer, there it is. Allows us to use gauges to track water use. So this is an example of an inline gauge that basically once we're in a drought year and we want to know, we need to reduce potentially how much water people are using, it can more easily be tracked if that cultivation site is permitted. Misconception. Cannabis cultivators don't care or know how to minimize environmental impacts. Again, I think it's important we just keep in mind, there's likely those egregious growers who don't care. And then I think there are a lot of people, especially in this community, that again have just been here cultivating a long time, that do really care about land stewardship. I mean, I've toured some of these farms and the biodiversity is high and there's companion planting and they're insects and butterflies. And so I think that, it's important we just keep this in mind. But here in our county, we have 3 local programs that support sustainable cultivation practices. And they're pretty actively participated in. So we have a Growing Green Art program, the Get Legit series, and Nevada County Good to Grow, where there's been a series of workshops to try to teach folks about best management practices and how to make their cultivation site better for habitat, wildlife, water quality and quantity. All right, and with that, we turn over to Diana for more policy-related misconceptions.
Cool. And I want to say something about the last slide. Hi, everybody. Which is that was that my mic? Okay. Nevada County has about 24 farmers we've got that are what's called Sun and Earth certified. That means that they are certified regenerative cannabis farmers. This is a very strict certification that looks at how the farmer gives back to the community, how they use the resources on their own land to create their own inputs for their farm, and grow organically. So we've got over 24 farms that are certified. We also have the highest percentage of farms that are certified organic by the state of California. That's called OCal. So we're really proud of our farmers, our small farmers, and their farming practices. So that's just a little bit about best management practices. So misconception: cannabis cultivators do not want to enter the legal regime, and this is one that is really important to address. There are several areas here of why a farmer may choose to get a license and those that choose not to. Those that are choosing not to get a license, there's several reasons for that. And number one is there's a cost. There's a very high cost. Not only we may be one of the most regulated industries in one of the most regulated states in a highly regulated county. And so there are several barriers of what it takes to step out and get a cannabis license. The $2,000 local permit, that's the least of it. We are regulated by at least 8 different agencies, whether it's the Water Board, Fish and Game, various other regulatory agencies where we need to get permits from and have compliance with. So there's a high cost. There's also a high cost to bring your land up to code. We are subject to both local land use policies, but every single cannabis farm is subject to site-specific CEQA conditions. So that means we have to do oak mitigation plans, various requirements to make sure that we are bringing our farms up to site-specific CEQA. Other sorts of projects that need site-specific CEQA, that is like your Dollar General, various supermarkets. Traditional agriculture does not need to meet site-specific CEQA. There's also other barriers that prevent one from getting a license, and it's not just that, we have a lot of farms that would like to get a cannabis license, but we also have to remember that a lot of these farmers have been farming in the Prop 215 era, and even prior to that, and so there is, with the new licensed industry, there is a new set of business skills required and new sort of understanding of regulatory compliance. And some of those farmers, they just want to farm. And so there's a little bit of that barrier as well. And then just coming out of the shadows, a lot of the farmers have, there's this life that's been created where you have been farming. You've chosen to be a cannabis farmer, living on your own terms, sort of away from mainstream society. And so we definitely see some farmers that have chosen to just kind of stick with that sort of a lifestyle. But ultimately, this is why our organization was founded in 2016. It was to help farmers come out of the shadows, to help provide the education necessary and the support and the resources so that people can seek licenses. That's what I want to say about that. Oh, I went to click on that. Those are the obstacles. Alrighty, misconception: the county is not doing enough to enforce egregious grows. Well, let me tell you, the county is doing a lot to enforce egregious grows. What? Oh, thank you. The county is doing a lot to increase the capacity to enforce egregious grows. I'm looking at our senior compliance officer who's here in the office, senior compliance officer who is in the audience, so I may call him up in just a moment here. But here are the stats of the number of farms that have been abated, cited, in progress, and have been found to be unfounded. And so what we see is that, and I know this as a fact because I work closely with the county, is that 100% of the complaints that come in, the county follows up on, and you will see that by the number of farms that have been abated. But in addition to that, we as the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, we support the county 100% in their enforcement efforts on egregious cannabis farms. We've supported policy and developments that have helped support this, and some of the just to set the context of enforcement here, our Board of Supervisors have provided very strict direction that they want to see increased enforcement. Not only that, many community stakeholders such as the Realtors Association and the Contractors Association and various neighborhood groups have also really supported the idea of strict enforcement against egregious farms, and egregious farms, which Alicia so eloquently defined what that looks like. So the county has brought forth a drone program, a pilot program that was at least 2 years ago at this point, 1.5 years ago. And that has proven to be successful in being able to access sites where the compliance officers were not able to access site, and really to get confirmation of an egregious gross. That's been successful. There's also been updates to the cannabis ordinance, so improvements to the appeals process, removing the maximum fine amount, so that if there's an egregious farmer, that there can be fines that can stack up that are equate to the environmental harm that's been done on that land. And really, what we're seeing now is a more proactive approach to enforcement, which all stakeholders in the community, from our board leadership to all the stakeholders I mentioned, to including the licensed cannabis industry, that we all support. Is there anything you'd like to add, Thomas?
We'll be providing a full update at the board workshop, I believe, on the 25th. And this isn't only cannabis compliance, addressing cannabis. We also collaborate with multiple agencies, state agencies, and a lot of these goals are not only to reduce the number of illegal grows, things affecting the environment, health and safety of neighborhoods. But this is also an effort to support our legal cultivators who have gone through the process and the efforts that we appreciate.
Thank you. Community discussion, concerns?
Yeah, that wraps up the formal part, so now we just want to open it up to any questions you guys might have or concerns, and yeah, kind of do our best to answer.
Mine's kind of easy, but I know many years ago I was a licensed contractor, and on all of our documentation we had to have our license number. If you deal with a consumer, you had to have
Yes, we not only have a local permit number, and we have a state license number. So cannabis farms are dual licensed by the state license and a local permit. And so what we have to adhere, cannabis farmers have to adhere to what's called track and trace, which traces the plant from the moment you have a seed, put it in the ground, all the way through its growth stage to its harvest, to its process, when it's trimmed, all the way through to sale, or if it's been turned into a product. And all the way through that chain, it is tracked by the license number.
And does that help eliminate the gregarious growers?
Well, exactly what it does is it prevents diversion, and exactly that. If a unlicensed farmer it prevents an unlicensed or an egregious farmer from entering the cannabis supply chain.
The legal
Cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Can I add something to that? The state of California, as they said in 2016, passed Prop 64. Currently, there's probably over 65% of the entire state of California that still has complete bans on all commercial cannabis activity. And so there's a very large supply chain issue because the state has not issued, comparatively to how much cannabis is grown statewide, they have issued very few retail dispensary licenses throughout the entire state. And so even to your point of like, does having a license number help deter other people from cultivating illegally? The marketplace, the supply chain has a very stiff bottleneck to it statewide, and it makes it very challenging, whether you have that license number or not, to sell all of what is being produced.
And the state didn't put a canopy limit on the proposition. There was one until the final hour. So when they did fully legalize it, there is no canopy limit statewide. Now at the county level, there are canopy limits, but some counties don't have strict canopy limits. So there are some counties where the amount being produced really exceeds demand. So the market has been flooded by this lack of canopy restriction.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I wanted to address on the slide where we talked about some of the, harmful chemicals, et cetera, impacts in our waterways. Something that's really important to understand about the legal cannabis industry is that there is any product that reaches all product reaches the marketplace, but all products must go through required testing, and that testing is, thankfully, we actually have a specific cannabis testing lab that's been licensed here, located in Nevada City, but cannabis is tested by parts per million for mycotoxins, pesticides, foreign objects, and
Metals.
heavy metals, mold, etc. So a commercial organic strawberry would not pass a test to get to shelf that cannabis has to go through. And because of these extremely strict testing requirements, we're small farmers here, and we all live in, we live in Nevada, Canada. We care about the environment. I like to think we're all, hippies on our land, but we can't put nasty chemicals in our plants because it wouldn't pass testing. Nor, of course, would we want to, but the testing requirements are unbelievably stringent. And if it does not pass testing, it actually cannot even be returned to the farmer. It has to go to immediate remediation, or the product has to be destroyed. So it's incredibly strict, the requirements.
I think they also test for bacteria like coliforms.
Yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate what SYRCL does, and thank you. I think it's important too to add with this sort of educational component that you guys create to just talk about like surface water drainage and impacts that you wouldn't normally expect, even if it's like a walkway to a garden or something, because right now we can see lots of sediment that's entering the watershed through different dirt roads and stuff, whether it's cannabis related or not. And I think that would be an important part of the educational component. Turbidity and how bad that is for fish, things on those lines.
Definitely.
And then also monitoring of it when it's like, sopping wet like it is now, going out and walking around your property to see what's running off the land and not being retained into the water table might be a consideration.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there are tools like a bioswale, and we did on our initial study, we're sampling turbidity as well, and especially I think at these more egregious sites. With the county requirements for grading and even walkways. I believe everything needs to have coarse gravel on top, so it's less of an issue, or culvert replacement. But I think there are so many things in the county that contribute to that, especially this type of year where, we're in 100-year events right now, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change. But it is an important thing to educate on, because it's not something that some folks think immediately comes to mind, I use organic fertilizers. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have any water quality impacts, because grading and even pathways and surfaces that don't have good drainage are gonna
contribute to turbidity. Definitely.
Have people asked organizations like SYRCL are you familiar, do people inquire with you guys about the impacts of any other industries locally like they do with cannabis?
That's a good question. We do get calls I think if you guys all remember that we had that big storm. It was like a huge storm in September.
Yeah.
And the first flush,
Yeah.
and the river was changing color, and it was like right before the cleanup. It was like so terrible. And we were definitely like helping the counties, like Department of Health, like get data, like on the spot, that type of thing. That was like a local landslide related thing. And the other thing we often sample are like abandoned mine and things like that, or we have in the past. But so we don't have a current program on that, but we have in the past. And we have gotten calls before, like our hydrologist, Carl, used to get, someone with kind of riverfront land witnessed people like illegally blasting rocks for, I'm presuming gold. But so we do get random calls and stuff like that. But of course, with some of the years that we went through when the cannabis, industry was booming and there wasn't a path for legalization, I think that it became just an easy thing for people to point their finger at, right, as it became sort of more in your face for a short time. Maybe not so short from certain perspectives, I don't know. Yeah, anyone else? But you're welcome to as well, Maggie.
Well, when I first moved to Nevada County, people used to say that there was phosphorus blooms or something in the Yuba. And I don't ever hear that anymore, but I also could never find the source of those statements. Do you ever recall hearing that or like no?
Algae or
I
phosphorus?
feel like people specifically said phosphorus, which seemed really random to me. And they would always assume that could only be from cannabis farmers, but then I would ask people like SYRCL and so forth if there was actually a phosphorus situation in the Yuba, and nobody sort of knew what was going on.
Yeah, we have our long-term river monitoring program, which is really great. It has 22 years of data at this point, it might be 21. And I know Kyle, our current hydrologist or eco-hydrologist, I know he's analyzing it a lot right now, and I've looked at phosphorus before, and I don't see a trend. Honestly, our river is, aside from potentially heavy metals, I think our river is pretty healthy. It doesn't have high nutrient values. There are trends we're noticing with such a large data set, an increase in air temperature, as is no surprise with global warming, and water temperature is very slight, but we do see a trend, and subsequently a slight decline in dissolved oxygen, which is related to temperature and affects aquatic organisms. However, all of the parameters are really pretty, high, like they're good for aquatic life right now. But when we look at these large data sets that we have been doing in sort of a first pass, it a little bit clouds the sort of micro topography of specific sites. So that's something we're getting into in the next few months to see if there's, obviously like in the lower Yuba when flows are really, really low and temperature becomes an issue for salmonids. So to my knowledge, there's not a phosphorus problem.
That's great news.
Yeah, but I know there has been like reports of algae blooms at Oregon Creek, I think. But again, temperature can often drive that, but elevated seasonal nutrients or turbidity can help contribute to that because the turbidity contains particulates that feed the algae once it settles down. So.
And are the heavy metals are from mining?
Yeah, mercury and lead. Yeah, which our river monitoring program doesn't have as robust of a heavy metal side, only because it's extra expensive to sample for. So that might be something we do more in the future, but in terms of our monthly monitoring, we do temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, conductivity, nitrates at select locations, and we've done phosphorus before too. Oh, on cannabis?
Actually, so we're not going to unfortunately have a film on cannabis, but we will be having Daniel Fink from Down on Farms have a coffee talk with us on Saturday in Nevada City. So he'll be talking about his farming practices, and it'll be really great. We're really excited to have him. So definitely join us for that.
There was a film called Ladybuds that we did a special screening of last year. Did you get a chance to see that? Yeah, that was a good film. If you haven't had a chance to see that, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. I don't know. Try the interwebs.
There's also a film that you guys showed last year that's called The Hill Witches of
Oh,
Nevada
right.
County, which is really special and is about medical cannabis, helping somebody in the ending stages of life, who is a local folks. It's really a fabulous educational short film that you can find on YouTube.
What was it called?
It's called The Hill Witches of Nevada County.
Any other questions? Yeah.
You know, I am confused by the bottleneck at the distributor marketing end of the chain, if that's the end of the chain, and what are the forces that make it so difficult to get established as as a prescription or general cannabis distributor at the retail level? It seems like that is moving at a snail's pace.
Yeah.
It seems like I'm hearing even in this discussion that that's a bottleneck that I hear terms like oversupply.
Yeah, so I think there's two things, right? So there's cannabis can only be sold retail. So if anybody in this room could buy it, we'd have to go to a dispensary. But like Nevada County only has one right now. There was talk, is there going to be a Grass Valley one?
There is going to be.
So there's going to be a second one, because basically that's been a monopoly, but you know.
But that has to go through a bunch of litigation.
Right, yeah.
I just had trouble finding the route.
Basically, it's like the city, it's like the infrastructure is not set up. The city, so it's legal statewide, and y'all please definitely add on. But then like Maggie was saying, most counties have actually put a ban on commercial cannabis. So Placer County, Nevada County and Yolo County are two of, a few that allow it. And so, everyone in Placer County to buy legal cannabis has to go to Sacramento or Nevada County. So really the one dispensary we've had here really serves more than one county.
Yeah.
And then the distribution license essentially would be, they still have to sell to dispensaries. So they can, gather brands. They're good for small farmers because they can buy from multiple different farmers and then go to the dispensary, and they can sort of solve that kind of networking. But I think that the tracking has also made it difficult for distribution companies to be successful. And that they also weren't allowing vertical integration at first. So early on, I know that farmers couldn't distribute their own. And now potentially if they have both licenses, they can.
Oh, separate license.
Yeah, separate licenses. But there are workarounds, I think now, people partner with someone who has a distribution license or a cultivation license. So originally they were trying to avoid vertical integration, which I understand, but you know, I think it's just like, it's new for our state, and though I think other states have done it better, unfortunately, you know, like, but I think it was harder for us because, you know, like Nevada, for example, was just, they didn't have this history. Like, California has a long history of cannabis, so for us, transitioning was even harder versus a state that just, you know, all right, let's make the rules and it's commercial now. I think it's a little easier. But I think ultimately the issue is a lack of dispensaries and dispensary
And
licenses.
does that issue exist in like Trinity County and Lake County? Or are things moving better
That's a good
in
question.
those counties? I mean, I'm just wondering if this is a Nevada county.
No,
No,
it's a statewide.
I'm in Trinity County and it's not moving any.
The same deal?
They don't have any dispensaries in Trinity County,
Oh,
actually.
right. Well, that's.
Well, we have two that are proposed, but it's also not a county for consumption, it's a cultivation county.
Yeah, yeah.
So really it's these consumption counties like LA, like the cities, that really need to step up their retail game to allow enough shelf space for all the farmers that are in these remote counties.
Oh, that's an interesting concept. So the cultivation happens in one place,
Yeah.
and the actual sales.
Well, historically, that.
You can't give away cannabis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was even times like early on, right after they legalized it, that these cannabis farms would get pulled over on the way to dispensaries and basically robbed by police, like money, everything, even though it's legal. I mean, it's like, you know, that was happening for more than, you know, right after they legalized it. So it is an issue. And I think, yeah, a lot of where the dispensaries are, like, yeah, San Francisco, and it's hard to get shelf space, you know, especially if you're not a brand or branded or, you know, partnered with other brands or with a distributor, all these things.
Yeah. That leads to my question. It sounds like we're going from farm right to retailer, but somewhere in the middle is processing.
Well, yeah.
So it's the farmer process?
Well, so cannabis has very specific terms for every activity. Processing for cannabis actually means trimming. So trimming can happen on the farm. Manufacturing is turning the raw cannabis into another product, whether it's a salve or a tincture or a lotion or whatever. Yeah, pen, you know, inhalable substances. You have to have a manufacturing license to have that, and there's two types of manufacturing license: a volatile manufacturing license or a non-volatile manufacturing license. One of the things that we're really proud of that just happened yesterday with our cannabis ordinance, there were several changes to the cannabis ordinance, and one of the things that the industry had advocated for was for the ability for the farmers to be able to create craft products or value-added products on their farm. So just like a veggie farmer can make salsa on their farm, or a rancher can make some soaps or whatever on their farm, that the cannabis farmer is able to do that too. And so that is one of the items that was approved yesterday, so that farmers.
So the pies will be coming forth soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna. Yeah, cannabis infused pies. I like it. Yeah, a cannabis bakery on the farm. I like that. We could put a commercial kitchen on a farm. I like that. But yeah, in the same way that a traditional farmer can bring craft, small value-added products in the winter months when they're not farming, that the cannabis farmer has that same opportunity. And that's really what the changes yesterday that the board adopted were about. It was about just trying to take out some of the bureaucratic rigmarole, and try to create equality between cannabis farmers and traditional farmers. We all have downtime in the winter months. How can cannabis farmers use all aspects of the cannabis plant to create something value add? So we're really happy about those changes.
Talk about the volatile, non-volatile, that's new terminology. Talk about that. What is that?
So volatile uses volatile substances. Butane is one of them to extract the cannabis material and compounds from the plant. It is highly, highly regulated by the Department of Cannabis Control and then also regulated at a local level. So for example, a volatile manufacturing has to be done in a C1D1 bomb-proof room, which we actually have 2 manufacturers in Nevada City who are operating, and they're regulated, of course, by the DCC and strict commercial fire requirements, and also the Office of Environmental Health. And then non-volatile uses non-volatile substance, so
CO2, I think.
CO2, ethanol, animal fats,
Yeah, that's all I can think of.
other olive oil, just, and to create, tinctures or lotion. So just 2 different processes that are regulated in 2 different ways.
Oh, ice.
Ice,
That's
oh yeah,
the other
ice
one.
extractions, yeah.
Extract ice.
Yeah, and so what was approved for on the farm is non-volatile manufacturing.
So you're pretty much regulated by state and counties?
Yes.
Federal staying out?
The federal is they do not want anything to
It's
do with
still
us right now.
illegal.
Yeah, it's still illegal at the federal level, which has made banking just a nightmare.
Then you're gonna have a whole nother set of regulations.
Always, and well, certainly the Fed will want their tax as well.
I mean, even Mississippi just went recreational this past election.
Oh, they did? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's an example of a report in a county or whoever intervention for if somebody calls in what they think is an illegal grow or bothersome grow?
I'm gonna
I mean, I'm
look at our
curious
friend.
about what that-
What's that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, having made such a call myself, the results were satisfactory, but I kind of wondered what the sausage.
Yeah, so we have multiple ways that you can submit a complaint. You can contact us directly. You can submit one on our online portal. You can do one in good old-fashioned pencil and paper. And we will, as Dan said, we do follow up on all complaints.
And the complaint goes to, it doesn't go to law enforcement, it goes.
Complaints stay with cannabis compliance, and they are confidential. An information, like if somebody did a public records request or something like that, the information you give on that, filing that complaint will not be public, it's protected information. Because we want to support people feeling safe in their community, turning a illegal grow onto us, and we don't want also neighborhood confrontations, right? Let us do the work, just bring it to our attention, and we'll do the work, and just separate yourself from it. And we'll follow through, and they take a few site visits. Diana mentioned we do now utilize a drone, which has significantly reduced our unfounded complaints. And our new ordinance updates that happened in June of last year did streamline our penalty issuance and our fee schedule. So we now penalize first day, where previously we allowed a 5-day abatement window. The tool of the penalties isn't to get funds. It doesn't fund my department. It doesn't go into my division's account. There's no benefit to that. It's to encourage somebody who is cultivating without a permit to come into compliance. It's really a tool to encourage.
So you might cite a specific, like a runoff violation or a pesticide violation.
So for water issues, we work directly with State Water Board, and we work with our Ag Commissioner's office, who's right behind you on pesticide issues if we see anything, and we work with Fish and Wildlife. So there is no shortage of state agencies that will assist us in appropriately addressing illegal grows.
You mentioned that the drones reduce your unfounded results. Wouldn't that just confirm an unfounded result? I mean,
So-
if you're using the drone because of a request or a complaint, and you use the drone to determine it's unfounded, shouldn't change the unfounded results necessarily?
Yeah, I think I understand. So let me just offer some more information and maybe we can clarify. So we do have a drone policy that we have begun using in the field of May of last year, I believe is the date. Now, we don't fly the drone on every site. The drone is the last tool in the toolbox. We use all other tools that the board of supervisors and again, my director has given to us to do the job without the drone. Now, we also only use the drone on egregious, illicit areas of high impact and concern. Our first tool isn't to go fly a drone in somebody's community. It's the last tool. Often, we can complete that without the drone. It's just if we can't. Now, if I'm getting to it, the drone is useful, but it's an imperfect tool. Our current policy, we set the drone down in a right-of-way, a public right-of-way, and we go straight up in the air. We do not cross into the property bounds, we do not travel any direction, and we come down. Now with that, you don't always get the results you are looking for. Now we may see 5 hoop houses that are fully sealed on the end, and we cannot identify cannabis. That is a unfounded complaint because we have to visually be able to see more than 6 cannabis plants because of your personal allowed use of 6 plants. So now we may have full belief and confidence that there is cannabis cultivation going on there, but if I cannot visually identify more than 6 cannabis plants, it will be logged as an unfounded complaint. And we may, due to the egregiousness, return at a later date and try to follow up. But that's the drone is not perfect, and we try to do everything we can to not utilize it.
Yeah, and you can't fly over a private property, so limited.
Currently,
Yep.
Is that a law? You can't do that, or is it
no, that's just our
fear of
internal.
it getting shot out of the sky?
With that,
Non-cannabis people who are involved in
yeah, we've had that told to us, and people on forums and whatnot. It really hasn't. That's just our own internal policy, just due to the nature and people's belief of the use of drones. So this is our community. We live here. It's our program, our community development office, the board of supervisors constituents. We're all together on this. So we don't want to do something that might be invasive or potentially to an unfounded innocent grow, and there may be tomatoes in there. So you're doing this across the board to try to be equal. But to date, we have received 0 complaints of the use of the drone. We haven't received any complaints from anybody who was the subject matter or from anybody else in the community.
Just out of curiosity, do you have trouble with deer, gophers?
Yes, and yes.
I picture deer eating cannabis and then wandering off.
Usually they're fenced,
Oh,
but it doesn't necessarily keep them out.
Yeah. Per our local ordinance, the entire cannabis garden has to be fenced with a child lock, up with a lock. But those critters, they sure know. Yeah.
You can line the bottom to prevent the gophers. That's fairly effective, but yeah, they sometimes do. We are definitely running out of time. So we will, there's still at least 10 minutes if we want to hang out and chat, but grab, or 5 to 10 minutes. But feel free to grab a muffin or a piece of fruit. And, yeah.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And this doesn't have to be the end of the discussion. Reach out to all of us. We'll have our cards up there. We look forward to the next workshop. Hopefully we'll schedule one soon. And yeah.
Aw,
Thank you
yay.
so much for coming out. We
nice.
really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.